Morning, all. All right, so Florida Panthers season preview time. So yesterday I started with Tampa Bay. Today I'm starting with Florida. So Florida-based starts for each day. Maybe I'll start with Carolina tomorrow, or maybe Nashville, something southern, right? At any rate, the Florida Panthers had a mediocre regular season, 42, 32, and 8. They were actually tied with the Nashville Predators overall for 18th spot in the league. They were also behind Calgary. So this is a team that if they'd been in the West, would they made the playoffs? We could have that debate some other time, sure. But the reality is, if Pittsburgh had beaten Chicago, we would be having a very different conversation about the Florida Panthers, about Paul Maurice, about how this team did or didn't come together. The conversation then would be, yeah, they played well late, but it was too little, too late, and there's problems on this team. But when your team goes all the way to the Stanley Cup final as an underdog, it kind of alleviates some of those concerns, doesn't it? So they scored 3.51 goals per game. We know this team can score. This is why Duclair, they were able to jettison him in the offseason. And in reality, this is a team that, has really good depth now, both up front and on the blue line. It's kind of insane how quickly Bill Zito's built this team up. So the 3.32 goals against per game, they're going to want to bring that down. That's not going to be easy early in the season because Ekblad and Montour are going to be on the shelf to start the season. But Bill Zito's been proactive and has added some defensemen to this team. We'll see when Ekblad and Montour return how the top six ends up looking from there. But I think they've done a pretty good job of adding stopgap measures that are necessary to keep this team in the hunt for a playoff spot, or even better, maybe finish top three in the division, right? So their power play 22.8%, that's above league average. Their penalty kill 76%, that's low, right? So they're going to want to improve the penalty kill number. Those numbers combine to 98.8, so that's a little below the line, right? So that's something they'll want to improve, but 5-on-5, they've been very good, and they did have a good run at the end of the season that got them into the playoffs. So that's the last time they made the playoffs. It's also the last time they won a round. Stanley Cups, there aren't any. But they've been close a couple of times, and this is why I find it interesting, too, when people talk about how, Bettman rigs things for this team and that team. Well, why haven't Arizona or Florida won a Stanley Cup? Because there's been the accusation that the NHL favors both Florida and Arizona at times, and the reality is neither of them have ever won a Stanley Cup. So, for the Florida Panthers, they're trying to win that Stanley Cup in 2024. I think they have a decent chance at it. Really means they're going to have to be better in the regular season, I think. Start with home ice advantage. But with cap space, it's deceptive. The long-term injured reserve hits with Ekblad and Montour means they'll have $9,824,999 in cap space, according to Cap Friendly. But again, that's deceptive. Ekblad and Montour will return during the season, and when they do, Florida's going to have some decisions to make in terms of who stays and who goes. The top five scorers on this team, Matthew Tkachuk, another tremendous season. 79 games, 40 goals, 69 assists, 109 points. Matthew and Brady Tkachuk, very talented brothers. Matthew right now the highest scoring. We'll see if it stays that way. It may very well. But Tkachuk is very happy, I think, in Florida. And I think Florida's pretty happy with Matthew Tkachuk. Barkov, 68 games, 23 goals, 55 assists, 78 points. We know how good Barkov is as a two-way forward. NHLers will still tell you he is underrated. There are some fans who will say he's underrated. I don't know. We can all have that argument, I guess, for a while. I don't know that I've ever seen a player that gets as many accolades as Barkov that people still say, yeah, he's still underrated. I'm not saying he's not. It's an interesting conversation to have. Montour, 80 games, 16 goals, 57 assists, 73 points. So Montour's coming off a career year, starting the season on LTIR. Will he be able to produce at the same rate when he returns from injury? Again, it was a career year. He's never really shown this kind of potential before. It may just be that it's that one really, really good year. So when his contract's up, you don't want to overpay on that 1 year. And now he's going to be out to start the season, so it's tough to really get a read on things early, right? So Montour's contract extension is going to have to wait a bit, I would think. Carter Verhaeghe, 81 games, 42 goals, 31 assists, 73 points. Another example of how good Tampa's development system is that so many players have left Tampa, Verhaeghe being one of them, and flourished elsewhere, while Tampa's still pretty good. But Verhaeghe's an excellent 40-goal forward in his own right. Sam Reinhart, 82 games, 31 goals, 36 assists, 67 points. He was very key for them during that playoff run as well. So yeah, the Florida Panthers are kind of stacked when it comes to their scoring. The goaltending, Bobrovsky takes a lot of flack, but if you look at the advanced stats, he's actually pretty good. He had a good year. 50 games, 24, 20, and 3 record, 901 save percentage. The 901 save percentage likely more indicative of the play in front of him than his play. Alex Lyon had a very good run. 15 games, 9-4-2 record, 914 save percentage. He has gone to the Detroit organization. Lyon's another example of a player who's probably best suited to be in the AHL, but he got hot at the right time in the NHL, and we'll see if that translates to this coming season. Spencer Knight, 21 games, 9-8-3 record. He also had a 901 save percentage, ended up in the player assistance program. As long as he's 100% ready to go physically and mentally, I think Knight can be a very good goaltender for the Florida Panthers and can get his numbers up. And Bobrovsky and Knight, maybe they have a 50-32 split in who gets the starts, which I think would be good. I think if Bobrovsky's limited to, say, 50 games, as he was this past season, we saw what he could do in the playoffs with that. So hits leader amongst returning players, Sam Bennett with 150. And I'm saying amongst returning players because some of their physical players left the team in the offseason. Block shots, again, amongst returning players, it is Forsling with 106 blocked shots. So Gustav Forsling, an offensive defenseman, but he's not shy about blocking shots either. The most posts, Sam Reinhart had 8 this season, so nobody in double digits for Florida. Looking for the next one. So now Florida's in a position where they've already got a lot of good young players in their lineup. I went with Samoskevich, and yeah, that was the one that I looked at and thought, sure, why not? Samoskevich. I'll make him the next one, I would think, of the players that are in the pipeline for Florida. The fantasy sleeper, I went with Denisenko. Now for Denisenko, A, he's got to make the team, and then B, he'd have to be in a scoring position. But this is a team that does roll 3 scoring lines, so even if Denisenko was on the third line, he could get his share of points. And again, with Florida, a team that we watched throughout the playoffs, it's hard to really find a sleeper because we all saw what this team can do in the playoffs. And for MVP, I went with Matthew Tkachuk because it's kind of got to be Tkachuk. Tkachuk is their best forward, their best overall player, and showed that he could take them a long ways in the playoffs, which has got to have Ottawa fans thinking, well, what can Brady do for us? Then you get to the schedule in November, 9 of the 15 games they play are on the road. I think the fact it's 9 on the road and it's 15 games overall, yeah, November's busy. So that's a key month right there for the Florida Panthers. October's pretty balanced in terms of its schedule, but November is the month that's really going to challenge them. So the channel vote, 26% of you voted for them to finish first or second. 57% of the vote went to third or fourth for the Florida Panthers. 14% went fifth or sixth, and 3% went to seventh or eighth, which I can't see. So that's got to be either mistakes, you sneeze when you're going to vote and you accidentally hit the wrong one and then you can't undo it, and just people who aren't really all that happy with Florida. That's the only 3 explanations I can come up with. But at any rate, Florida should be in the mix for a playoff spot, and really honestly, with Boston being weakened down the middle, I could see Florida taking a bit of a jump in the points. I think they underachieved during the regular season. I could see Boston dropping down. I do think there's an opening for Florida in the top 3. How fun would it be to have the Battle of Florida in the first round again? Maybe Toronto wins the division, Tampa and Florida meet in the first round, and boom, there you go. And then for Toronto, maybe it's the Rangers they play in the first round. Maybe that happens, right? That kind of. So I'm now fantasy booking the playoffs. But at any rate, I think Florida's going to be a lot of fun to watch because they're always fun to watch. And hopefully they're not relying on a bunch of comebacks. They seem to avoid that this year, but there's been years where they rely too much on comebacks. At any rate, exits and additions, there's a lot here. Duclair exits the team, so he had an up and down season. They trade his contract. Radko Gudas leaves as a free agent. Eric and Mark Stahl, so both Stahl brothers, exit the team. Colin White is gone as well. Patrick Hornquist, of course, retired, and Lyon has moved on to Detroit. The additions, Evan Rodriguez, who does a little bit of everything. He has some offensive upside as well, and upside just meaning that from one week to the next, you never know what you're going to get with Evan. He can, over a 4-game period, get you 7 points. He has that kind of talent. Lawrence has been added as well. Stenlund, Asplund, because they needed a couple of Lunds, I guess, to to add to the lineup. And then Mikkola has been added on a contract that raised some eyebrows, including my own. But I will say for Florida, I give them the benefit of the doubt. You look at some of the players on this team, like Verhaeghe, like Forsling, they have very good pro scouts, so they see something in Mikkola that they feel will complement their lineup. So I will give them the benefit of the doubt on that one. They added OEL. Ekman Larsson's buyout from Vancouver made sense. The contract he signed with Florida, it's a good contract. I think it's good for both sides. And so I do think that Ekman Larsson can have a little bit of a bounce back in Florida. I don't expect him to get back to where he was in Arizona, but I think he can have a bounce back in Florida. Kulikov's been added on the blue line. Mike Riley's been added on the blue line. So they've added 4 blue liners in total. And so 2 of those 4 are going to be asked to at least support the team while Ekblad and Montour are out in a much bigger role than they will when Ekblad and Montour are back. Stolars has become the number 3 goaltender in this organization. Or maybe he ends up being the backup. Maybe Knight ends up needing some time in the minors. We'll see, right? But Stolars can be a good goaltender. I thought he had some good starts for Anaheim. I'm honestly a little bit surprised that Anaheim didn't find a way to keep him. However, Dostal does appear to be ready. So the defense is going to get tested early for the Florida Panthers. It's going to get tested early and often. The 9 out of 15 in November is going to definitely test those numbers as well. Reinhart, Montour, and Forsling aren't just 3 good young players. All 3 of them are also unrestricted free agents next summer. There's others, but those are the 3 I felt were worth highlighting in this video. Reinhart, as mentioned, 31 goals last season. Montour, a career year with 73 points. And Forsling, a shot blocker who has also got some offense to his game. And so we'll see how much that costs for Florida, a team that has been up around or over the cap for the last couple seasons now because they're doing their best to compete with everybody else. This is year 2 for Paul Maurice. Do we see the numbers get better in the regular season? There was plenty of criticism, myself included. I thought, well, it doesn't look like Maurice's systems work with this team, and then it clicked in the playoffs. So do we see it click again to start the season, or are there issues out of the gate? That'll be interesting to watch. Bill Zito's run as GM this is unprecedented for Florida that they're this good for this long. Even the 96 run, by summer of 97, Florida was back to being kind of overlooked, and then they were out of the playoffs altogether, and making the playoffs in consecutive seasons was almost unheard of until this run. So this is a team that's made the playoffs 4 straight years, if you include 2020 where they lost in the qualifying round. If you don't, then it's 3 years in a row, and that would still be franchise record. It's been a long time of some mediocre results on the ice, something that both Florida and Arizona have seen. Markets that get criticized a lot, but when your team isn't any good, and now Florida fans are showing up, the team's really good. Who knew? Now, it's the first time they've also been out of round 1 in back-to-back seasons. I felt that was worthy of highlighting, too. So they've shown that they're a playoff team. I would not be surprised to see them get out of the first round this year as well. Again, I would love to see them against Tampa Bay in the first round this year. I think that would be a fantastic series. Barkov is basically going to be leading all the record books for Florida soon enough. He's only 7 games back of Jonathan Huberdeau in terms of the most games played by a Florida Panther. He is second all-time in assists, also behind Huberdeau, 27 behind Huberdeau for that. So by Christmas, Barkov should have the games played, goals, assists, points, all of it. It's all Sasha Barkov. Bobrovsky, on the other hand, he's third all-time in wins. He's 1 behind John Van Beesbrook for second. He's quite a ways behind Roberto Luongo for first. But if Bobrovsky sticks around, he absolutely could end up getting that number 1 spot. It is an expensive contract, which means that at some point in time over the next year or so, we'll probably hear again, if Florida could trade Bobrovsky's contract, but they haven't. And it's still going to be a difficult one to move if they ever decide to do that. But for cap space, for cap flexibility, I totally understand why that's the contract that gets pointed to first as the one that, boy, if they could just move this one. But at any rate, we'll see what happens this year. This should be a fun one for Florida. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.